well, it's, you know, I'll read them out as we go. So, right, okay, well, I'm ready to roll if everyone else is ready to roll. Right, so as I said, the first screen, you all know about it, it's brilliant. I was on a Zoom call last night with a whole lot of doctors and stuff, about 123 people were on it. David Icke was speaking to them, and literally there were 3 doctors, I believe, actually in the convoy, and they were going to relay this live to all the truckers, with David Icke giving them encouragement and telling them to stick at it, and with a $7 million war chest. And knowing as I do what truckers are like in Canada, I actually did meet a few once when I was in America, they're going to stick it out. And Trudeau will have to climb out of his bunker at some time. So I think it is going to be remarkably interesting. But I don't know about you, but watching all the ordinary Canadian people, they're not the far right, as some would like to believe. They're ordinary families coming out because they've had enough of having their lives micromanaged. And we're all getting round one word, freedom. And that brings us all together. And gradually the learning process, more and more people are going to learn the bigger picture. But it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I just hope this works. Hooray! Right. The title tonight is the Pushback Strategy, Mobilising Suppressed Knowledge to Put an End to Tyranny Once and for All. And for those who don't know, my name is Justin Walker. I was a Green Party activist from 1978 to 1992, and I'm the co-founder of the New Chartist Movement and the Hardwick Alliance for Real Ecology, which a lot of people probably haven't heard of. This is the Hardwick Alliance for Real Ecology. I met up with Sir Julian Rose, who's an organic farmer. He owns an estate down on the Thames. He lives in Poland most of the time with his Polish wife. He's leading the campaign there to get the Poles to stand up to Europe and the European Union and all the bureaucrats and all the rubbish that's going on there. That's our logo. A lovely hare, looks like a rabbit, it's a hare, meeting a signpost saying true freedom and real ecology one way, and the other way, I'll read the bloody thing, fake greens and something, I should know this, global fascism, there we are, global fascism, and fake greens. And David Bellamy, rest in peace. I knew David as a good friend. We lost him last year, a year ago now. A lovely man, and he didn't kowtow to the bullying that went on in the BBC and elsewhere to adopt the official Green New Deal narrative. He held out. So we do everything in his memory, and his family are very appreciative of that. Right, now, this man, Klaus Schwab, and our wonderful logo, one wit said to me, it is Klaus Schwab meets Beatrix Potter. And I thought that was rather nice. It's a very gentle logo, but he's not so gentle. I mean, all right, he should have a white cat, he should be stroking it like this. He is the Bond villain, and the more we find out what is going on, he is the villain, but just a useful idiot villain, as I'm going to show. Right, talking of useful, you can't read that, but you've probably seen this before. I won't touch too much on COVID-19, except it's never been isolated. I put COVID-19 in inverted commas, but we all know how Bill Gates has funded academia and all the doctors and God knows what else, and we know, oh, well done, that's lovely, well done, focus. And you can see that the hand of Gates, or Hog, the hand of Gates is everywhere. But Gates is just a useful idiot as well. So let's not get too carried away that thinking Gates is the Messiah and that he is the cause for everything. He is not the Antichrist, he is just a useful idiot. Now, I just want to put this is my interpretation of COVID, and this was taken as of 4:30 p.m. yesterday. And I go on to this World Health Organization site, and they have a dashboard which tells you the latest figures. So we see there, I put it in red, as of yesterday at 4:30, 5,631,457 deaths, according to them, from COVID-19. Now, the current world population on the clock said 7 7,923,821,236. I wish I hadn't done that now. Can't say it. I was never very good at mathematics. Anyway, the point is, you divide the figure of the global population by the number of people who have claimed to have died from COVID-19, and you find that for one individual, for every 1,407 people, has supposedly died from COVID-19, and the average age is 82. So please tell me what the bloody problem is. Why are we doing all this insanity? Those are the official figures. Well, that should be enough to say, just log off, we don't want this. So there we are. So what is the problem, or more importantly, what is really going on? Well, I think from the audience, I think you already know what's going on. Klaus Schwab, once again, and Thierry Marret have produced a thing called COVID-19, The Great Reset. They were just waiting for this, because it's all pre-arranged. And he's written 3 books since all this happened. They're very boring, not recommended. But what have we all got in common here? The Great Reset, also known as Build Back Better. In Canada, Build Back Better. Boris, Build Back Better. Then we've got the 4th Industrial Revolution, dear old Klaus Schwab. And then we've got our President of the United States. Is he still President? Yes, I think he is. Build Back Better. And then we've got Building Back Better with a green recovery. Is that the green recovery that when I joined the Ecology Party back in 1978? I don't think so. Now, what do the following people all have in common? Boris Johnson, Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, Vladimir Putin. Now, I didn't know about this one until 2 days ago. Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, and Jacinda Ardern, and Tony Blair. Have you noticed I've not given him his rank? Because I refuse to acknowledge it. Okay? No. So there we are. Those individuals, they all belong to the Forum of Young Global Leaders, shaping the future, committed to improving the state of the world. Aren't we all reassured? Now look at this little lineup. G7 Cornwall. Right. Gone into hiding. One of Klaus Schwab's men. He obviously is the United States of America. He knows all about Build Back Better. Boris, one of Klaus Schwab's men. Macron, one of Klaus Schwab's men. And, well, she's not there now, but she was then, and she is. Now, the back row, we didn't even bother to check. But I checked today, and she has a very close liaison with Klaus Schwab. I'm not sure who he is. Anyway, those 3, well, we don't know. But the point is, isn't it strange how to a small group of people, they become leaders of their state, they become leaders of their countries. So it's by no accident, it's all contrived, it's all arranged behind the scenes. Now I'm just going to whiz through these pictures. This is the state of the world that these wonderful politicians, wonderful leaders have given us. Now I've used these pictures before, and I apologise everyone's seen them before, but they are pretty distressing. This is the reality of life on Earth at the moment in many parts of the world. I'm sorry, these are very emotive. That's how we expect fellow human beings to live in many parts of the world. Well-used picture, but I'm going to argue that may be a well-used picture, but in any war, that is what happens. A baby suffering from the effects of depleted uranium in Iraq. Now, obviously, miss another payment and we take the blanket. Tragic comedy. And of course, in this country, food banks. I live in a small town in Wales called Dolgellau. I pronounce it well, by the way. I've got the phlegm going. I've learned 8 words of Welsh so far. I'm very good at wishing people bore da. And I went into the butcher's a few weeks ago and I said, bore da, and he said, good attempt. Noon yet, so I'm stumped. I always go out in the morning only. But joking apart, I was coming past the Methodist church on Thursday evening with the dog, going home, and there were about 20 people outside the food bank. So serious for the moment. It's happening, and it's going to happen more and more with what's happening with it.
I had someone say yesterday that there are more food banks in England now than branches of McDonald's. Seriously.
And better food for it. Yeah, it is going to get serious. I'm trying not to make it too light. It is going. But look, you've got this. We all know where it's happening. All right, it's Grenfell. I know it may seem a bit dated, but why did Grenfell happen? Because poor people, not looked after, not cared for, and that was allowed to happen. And here we go. 62 really rich people own as much as 3.5 billion people. That's Oxfam International. So it's the system, the whole global economic system is completely wrong. Extreme poverty, extreme wealth, how can we ever justify this? Kids going through the rubbish piles, luxury boats in Monte Carlo or Cannes or wherever. I mean, you know, it's just ridiculous what we allow. Now, we mentioned the deep state. What is the deep state? Well, I know some people call them the New World Order, the Illuminati, what have we got?
The Davos cult.
The Davos cult, or David Icke just calls them the cult. And we've got, you know, the military-industrial complex, the Venetian nobility. I mean, there's about 10 different ways of explaining who they are. I call them the deep state because this definition is probably the most accurate. The deep state is believed to be a clandestine network entrenched inside the government, bureaucracy, intelligence agencies, and other governmental entities, not to mention the mainstream media. The deep state supposedly controls state policy behind the scenes, while the democratically elected process and elected officials are merely figureheads. So I think that's pretty good. I could probably rewrite it slightly, but I think that's not bad. Okay, the deep state. Well, you've all heard of these names. The Committee of 300, the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations USA, European Council on Foreign Relations, the Pilgrim Group, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Groves, the Rhodes Club. You could probably give me some more. And the one I want to just pay a bit of attention on now, the Club of Rome, the creator of man-made global warming. Now, I don't like to names drop, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to a little bit here. My late uncle attended the very first Bilderberg Group meeting in 1954 at the Hotel Bilderberg in Holland. And where that blue arrow is, that's my dear uncle by marriage. And he was a lovely man. He wasn't a sinister psychopath waiting to take over the world. He was actually one of the most generous people, the most eccentric people. He once, and this is a true story, he once had the governor of the Bank of England and all the directors of the Bank of England come up to Windle Hall, which was his place at the time, and they all came, rather like Downton Abbey, dressed for dinner jackets, came down to have their meal, and he was there in his Fijian shirt, Hawaiian whatever, sandals, and with a cook's hat on his head, and he gave them a barbecue, and they loved it. So he was eccentric, he was lovely. He was, however, in those days he was called Sir Harry Pilkington. He was in charge of the FBI, and that's not the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That is the Federation of British Industries before it became the Confederation of British Industries. So in 1954 it was the FBI, then became the CBI, and he was invited on the strength of that. And I didn't know about this. He died in 1985, and it was only in 2008. But the guest, well not the guest list, the invite list of the first Bilderberg conference was made available, and there was my uncle. Now, as a result, my uncle obviously knew people, and one of the people he knew because of Pilkington's glass was Aurelio Peccei, because he was about number 2 or number 3 at the Fiat Motor Company, and Fiat Motor Company, like most companies, used Pilkington glass. So they knew each other as good friends. I found myself having a meeting with Aurelio Peccei along with Thor Heyerdahl, the explorer, at a lunch in 1982, and he offered me a job. He asked if I would like to go to, because he knew I was involved in the Green Party, Ecology Party, and all the things I was involved in, and he asked if I would like to go and work for him at the Club of Rome, helping to do his political research and political lobbying. And he actually said to me, and this is the exact quote, he said, "Justin, you're going to be joining me at a very exciting time. The Club of Rome, you're going to join us at a very exciting time because we are creating a huge global environmental problem that will frighten people into wanting a world government run by us," which was man-made global warming, which eventually morphed itself into climate change. And climate change today, well, 4 years ago, suddenly Extinction Rebellion came onto the scene. Now, I didn't know anything about it. Nobody, apart from one of our people, Eddie, knew about it. None of us knew about it. They suddenly emerged, And I'm not going to, I think a huge number of really decent people are following it without knowing where it's really come from. And I'm sorry, when you look at the death pictures, and I'm sorry, it's so many times they use these figures of death, and it's just not me. I was in the, as I said, I joined the Ecology Party in 1978. We were really about values, organic farming, organic food. We were about involving the people, small communities, decentralisation, Schumacher, small is beautiful. It was something lovely about it. We didn't have pictures of death. We didn't need to convince people. It was just something nice about the Ecology Party. And in fact, one of the first Green parties was in New Zealand, and that was called the Values Party. And you think, well, that meant values. But suddenly everything's changed. And it's because they've been hijacked by the bankers, as we'll come on to. So, you know, I'm sorry. I love the planet. I love the ecology of the planet. This is why I've teamed up with Julian Rose. We love the, you know, we want to protect the planet. But let's protect it with the truth and with real wisdom. And I just feel deeply unhappy with what's going on. Because now Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, is now working for the UN Secretary General, and any company that doesn't produce the right amount of carbon or whatever it is are going to be put out of business. He's actually said we're going to fine them. So lots of good big companies are going to go bust. Or I mean CO2. I mean, I'll bring back David Bellamy here, and I'm not a scientist, but if I said to you, what percentage of the Earth's atmosphere is CO2? Now, I've asked a lot of Extinction Rebellion this, and they said 10%, 15%, 25%. It's 0.04%. I'm sorry, you know, this is where I do get worried. I mean, everyone I talk to, a real scientist, tell me that CO2 follows temperature increases. It doesn't create it. And we need CO2. It's the food for plants that give us the oxygen we breathe for all life on Earth. So why cut back on it? I mean, it doesn't, there's nothing, just something not right. As I say, I'm not a scientist. Nor am I an economist. So when I start talking about banking and stuff, please forgive me. I am just an individual who observes and applies common sense. I am not an economist, I am not a scientist, but I apply common sense to when I see things. And I get two contrasting pictures, I look at them and just apply common sense to them, as I'm sure you all do. So we've got, the Greens have jumped into bed with Mark Carney, they've jumped into bed with George Soros, they've jumped into bed with Klaus Schwab. I mean, you know, what a repugnant vision to have. Sorry, I mean, that wasn't, if you want to censor that, I mean, yeah, but you know what I mean. Please. Now, what does Klaus Schwab want to do to everyone? He wants to give us a new vision for humanity. Well, the rise of technocracy, you've seen these pictures. I mean, what's happening in China is what our society is going to be like in 2030 onwards, if we're not careful. On the left there, you think it's an illustration to show the social credit scheme. Now, obviously the one thing that the other side, as I call them, our friends in the shadows want, is to get rid of cash. So we have a cashless society. They want everyone to have smartphones. Here's my phone. Ask for my, oh really? Really? Oh, there's my, the point is, they're using technology to enslave us. And in China, this is where it's happening. So when people accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist, I say, well, hang on, just look at China and their modern cities. They have got a social credit scheme whereby if you are good, hard-working, you apply by all the rules and regulations brought out by the Communist Party of China, you do everything that President Xi Jinping says, and his cronies say, you keep a clean nose, you don't go around causing problems, you basically get on with your job, you just get on with your family, and you just do as you're told, we will let you travel. You might be able to go on a train or somewhere. We'll give you so much money, we'll give you support. In other words, your life will be micromanaged by those who know best, or more accurately, by artificial intelligence. I mean, it's incredible. We are literally handing over our lives to artificial intelligence, which in turn is owned by a handful of people. So in China, they're unraveling. So when we talk about a social credit scheme, when I was in the Green Party, I used to love a thing called the basic income scheme, whereby you gave people from the state, you gave them a certain amount, so you didn't fall off, you become poor, you become hungry, and then you could set up a business or do something, but you had a safety net of a basic income scheme. And, I loved that. I felt it was fair, I felt it was just. But it's a double-edged sword, because if it's coming from those who know best, and if you don't perform, they pull the plug on you. And so in other words, you've got people who don't like you, and don't like humanity, deciding on the social credit system. You've got problems, especially if that system is run by artificial intelligence. And one thing that we do know is that the people on the dark side, shall we say, have technology probably 20 or 30 years ahead of what's in the marketplace. Now, we've always got to accept that they've, got things going on. Some people say, deep underground military bases. I'm not going to get involved in all that, but I do know that technology is there 20 or 30 years ahead to what's in the marketplace. So that is one vision. Then you have the cities of the future, the smart cities of the future. And of course, in China, that picture and that picture are two cities in China. Soulless, absolutely dependent upon high technology. And these are obviously visions of what some people see as smart city. You've got the Internet of Things. You've got the Internet of Bodies, I think it's called, where literally you will become a part of the system. And of course, again, there's a double-edged side to it. If you were born with a crippled limb, and you're suddenly given a limb that is almost human, but it works, or you're blind and you're suddenly given eyes, you can see. Great things can happen from technology and advancement in human knowledge, but that human knowledge has got to come from people who are benign, who want to help, who want to serve humanity. They want to control humanity. To me, our existence should be about service. We all serve one another. We all go out of our way to help one another. But not here. It's all about finding ways to control you. So this future, to me, is a nightmare. And then you ask yourself, well, what about food? Well, there's your food. It's coming to you in the future. Plant factory with artificial lighting. They're already doing this. This is not science fiction. And they're talking about insects becoming nutritious. They want people vegan. Now, I have no problems with vegans. My daughter's vegan. My wife's vegetarian. I eat less meat, but it's all organic and it's local. I have no problem with people eat. And vegan, I have every respect for. But they're promoting vegan, and the food you'll get will not come from soil. It won't come from this. It comes from that. And I'm sorry, this is what's planned for the future. We know it. That is what our food production should be like, where the animals are cared for, welfare, abattoirs. Yes, all right, we kill to eat. If that's the case, abattoirs should come to your farm. One of the things that we feel quite strongly about, they did this in France, is where an abattoir comes to the farm, the animal for slaughter comes around the corner, totally calm, up against the bolt gun, down. No stress, no nothing. And the animal is being brought up in a very humane way. So, as meat eaters, I think we've got to become responsible with what we eat, and we should need to know. I've been to abattoirs, I've seen the reality of large-scale abattoirs, and I didn't like what I see. Ever since then, I've tried to buy meat which is locally sourced, where I know the animal has been cared for as best you can. So that, and as Julian Rose would give you a lecture on it, is the way our farming should be. Small to medium-sized farms, and to get away from agribusiness. Now, I'm leading on to the meat of the day. Trouble with the deep state-controlled Greens, in inverted commas, who support the so-called Green New Deal and the Great Reset, is that they never ever talk about money creation, money supply, and the private central banking system. Why? Because the fraudulent bankers are their ultimate controllers. And I put underneath, just ask Positive Money and the New Economics Foundation. I'm going to give you an example now. How many people in this room have heard of Positive Money? Okay. I'll tell you a story. When I was told about the Bradbury Pound, which I'm going to come on to, when I got told about this big secret, if you like, about banking, I immediately rang up Ben Dyson, who was just starting Positive Money. And I thought, this is brilliant. I've just been given the secret by an insider, what the other side don't want to be made public. I thought, great, he's going to amplify this. If I tell him what I've been told, he can check it up, it's all history, and he'll be able to promote it and get things moving. So I talked to Ben, And it's all very friendly until I mentioned the organisation I'm about to mention, the Bank for International Settlements, and I mentioned the Bradbury Pound, which I'm also about to mention. And immediately he called me a conspiracy theorist. What? And he said, I'm not into it. Positive money is not into conspiracy theories. I'm sorry, we're only interested in finding new ways of creating money for the good of all. I said, okay, well, I can try and work with you. He said, as far as we're concerned, the Bank of England must be the way it is done.
Yeah.
Bank of England? Well, I better explain that Ben has since moved from positive money about 4 years ago, and he moved to the Bank of England,
Yeah.
where he became involved in looking at digital currencies. His latest job, where he is at the moment, he's working for the Bank for International Settlements at their hub in Singapore, developing for countries like Malaysia and Indonesia the central bank digital currencies. He's in the enemy camp. So positive money, I've tackled them and they can't answer me back. I've given the evidence and they can't do anything. The New Economics Foundation, I was actually involved with them at the beginning because it started out with an Ecology Party initiative called the Other Economic Summit, TOES. And we had TOES 1, TOES 2, I'm not sure how many we had, until they suddenly morphed their name into the New Economics Foundation. They are now receiving, and I've got to be careful what I say here, but I think it's about £3 or £4 million a year from various trusts. And when you look at the trusts, like the Roundtree Trust and people like that, you know it's controlled opposition. And to put it bluntly, when I gave them the evidence about the Bradbury, which we're going to come on to in a moment, and the Treasury money and all that, they didn't want to know, and still don't want to know. And they can employ up to about 30 people, huge amount, they're all paid 25, 30,000 a year, 35,000 a year. But you're looking at quite a big outlay, and what are they actually doing to tackle poverty and injustice in the world, and the third world and everything else? They don't go near it. They don't want to know about the Bank for International Settlements, which we're going to come on to. So, as I said, a lot of our movement is controlled by the other side. And this is where we've all got to sit back, ask the right questions, and see how they answer. My introduction to the Bank for International Settlements. What's that? The Death Star. Well, I've just lost a very good friend called David Pidcock, who, along with Ken Palmerton, were my gurus. They guided me on an awful lot. Once I found out about the Bradbury, I discovered them, and they were pointing me in the right direction. David sadly passed away in December, but I do my talks in memory to David Pidcock and to Ken Palmerton, two brilliant people, and I miss them very much. But he didn't call it the Death Star, he called it the Debt Star.
Yeah.
He was always wonderful with his puns. Right, there's the Bank for International Settlements. There we are. What can we say about the Bank for International Settlements? Well, look at the shape of that building. I'm now going to show you the Vatican Bank. Just a coincidence, not. Right, the Bank for International Settlements. I take it most of you have heard of this organisation before tonight, haven't you? Yeah. I will tell you now that I've talked to 21 MPs, face to face, never met them before. And when I say hello, my first question is, what can you tell me about the Bank for International Settlements? Duh. Nothing. My latest MP, she's a lovely lady, Plaid Cymru. First thing I did when I got onto Skype or a Zoom call with her, hello, lovely to meet you, I'm your new constituent. Oh dear, poor you, having me as a constituent. I said, can you tell me anything about the Bank for International Settlements? Nothing. Bradbury Pound? Not a thing. Nobody knows about it. I mean, you know, seriously, I mean, if we looked at the world as a whole, it's probably more like 0.001% have ever heard of it. But in this country, probably around about 1%. But if you ask people, what does it do? That figure drops immediately. So, let's just analyse, shall we, what the Bank for International Settlements does. It is a privately controlled and has given itself diplomatic immunity. I love it. It's given itself diplomatic immunity. I'm going to try that with the next traffic warden. Sorry, got diplomatic immunity. I gave it to myself. Tough. It controls 63 of the world's central banks, including the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, and the European Central Bank. Since I wrote that, and this is an old slide, I apologise, since then I've checked up, and they actually do oversee as well all the other central banks in the world, including Afghan Dar Bank, which is the bank for Afghanistan, which is hilarious at the moment because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, you go on there, you've got all the Taliban sitting around the table looking like bankers, and they have no idea what they're doing. And of course, all their money's being withheld, but they are being manipulated by the Bank for International Settlements. And you've got the Bank of Libya, which is a completely collapsed country. And of course, poor Gaddafi, I mean, Gaddafi was no saint. So let's not get, Gaddafi was not a saint. But he gave his people money. When you got married, you got given quite a large lump sum. You had encouraged to buy your property. He was trying to establish gold dinars in Africa. He was trying to bypass the central banks. He was a hero to some extent. He was still cruel by our standards, but by their standards, quite benevolent. But he had to go because basically he didn't agree with the central banking system. And what was the first thing the rebels did when they started? They created the central bank in Benghazi. Wasn't that a coincidence? First thing the rebels, wait, we're going to get rid of Gaddafi. Right, let's set the bank up, let's get the bank going. That's the first thing they did. So they actually oversee all the banks in the world, but there are 63 members of the Bank for International Settlements. It oversees over 95% of the world's money supply. One of my contacts said it's like 97%, but okay, so it's well over 95%. It uses extreme secrecy to operate. The minutes taken at its top-level meetings are never made public. Now, my late uncle was a director of the Bank of England from 1955 to 1972. And because of that, he did give me some idea that things were not quite normal. When I was on my way back to school, he actually said to me, I was 16 for God's sake, going back to school to do O-levels, and he was asking about my career, and he was saying, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll probably go in the army, and I'll probably go in the family business. He said, well, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice. Never believe anything you read in the press because we control it, and never, ever believe a politician when they say they can do something. They can't unless we say they can. Now, that's a pretty accurate assessment. Given to a 16-year-old, it went over his head, but by God, I remember the conversation. But I just remember thinking, well, he means business, he means big business, or something. I just vaguely thought something to do with business. But this is how they operate. They basically control, the bankers control every aspect of what's going on in our lives. Did you know that the current TUC General Secretary, whose name I've gone and forgotten, I knew I would, can anyone help me, TUC Secretary General? See, it's funny how we've all forgotten, in the old days, the trade union, you remember all the officials. I'm trying to, she's a lady, but anyway, did you know she was a director of the Bank of England? No. They have a finger in every pie. This is how it's done. Now, the Bank for International Settlements, the founders of the Bank for International Settlements, Halmer Schlatt, Hitler's finance minister, and Montague Norman, the governor of the Bank of England from 1920 to 1944. They created the Bank of England, the Bank for International Settlements. It was originally set up to oversee German war reparations, which had stalled because of the collapse of the Deutschmark, when they had hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic. And by the way, the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic wasn't because of something the government did. That was currency speculators on Wall Street and in London who brought about that collapse. And it was basically a way of creating total chaos, not dissimilar to what chaos is happening today. And what comes in? Adolf Hitler and his thugs. So, you create the chaos and then you provide the solution. Problem, reaction, solution. And of course Hitler was the solution for them. So when you hear about the Weimar collapse, Weimar hyperinflation and all that, forgive me, it is nothing to do with the bad governance by the Weimar Republic at the time, the government. It was purely orchestrated from outside by the financiers, the hidden people. Right. Now, about the Bank for International Settlements. We've got a book written in 1966 called Tragedy and Hope by Professor Carroll Quigley of Georgetown University. Now, he had integrity, and he managed to become very friendly with the insiders. One of the people he groomed, or I say groomed, he briefed, was Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton looked upon him as one of his mentors. Now, Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. One of the things that Carroll Quigley knew, there's 2 levels. When you go to university, if you're a chosen one, you have a different pathway to ordinary people. And the ones who are on a different pathway get illuminated. They get told how the world really operates, not what we believe today in the mainstream media and stuff. Now, Carroll Quigley was allowed to go to some of these meetings, and he met people, and so in the end he wrote a book, Tragedy and Hope. And I'm going to read this out to you. He put, "The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands," key point, in private hands, "able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world central banks, which were themselves private corporations. The growth of financial capitalism made possible a centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury of all other economic groups." It must not be felt that these heads of the world's chief central banks, the governors, were themselves substantive powers in world finance. In other words, they didn't make the decisions. They were not. Rather, they were the technicians, useful idiots, and agents of the dominant investment bankers of their own countries, who had raised them up and were perfectly capable of throwing them down. The substantive financial powers of the world were in the hands of these investment bankers, also called international or merchant bankers, who renamed largely behind the scenes in their own unincorporated banks. These formed a system of international cooperation and national dominance which was more private, more powerful and more secret than that of their agents in the central banks. So what are we looking at? Well, you know the names. In other words, we are talking about the leading dynastic banking families, including the House of Rothschild, Warburg, Rockefellers, Goldman Sachs, Oppenheim, Medici, Morgan Stanley, Schiffs. And this is when you usually get told, "You're anti-Semitic! My God, you mentioned the Rothschild! Oh my God!" And all the liberal left, and they go hairless. It's not, these are facts. You can't alter the facts. And I will tell you now, if anyone does accuse you of being anti-Semitic, these families are not Jewish. They're Sabbatean Frankists. And when you understand about the cults of the Sabbatean Frankists, it opens up a whole new picture. And I tell you what, the people who are shouting anti-Semitic don't know what to say, because you immediately go back to facts. But that's another story.
What is a Sabbatean Frankist?
Two cults. Oh gosh, I wish I bought my book. You had Sabbatean. Well, he was basically, if I remember rightly, he was a Jewish slave in Turkey who created a cult that believed the more sin you committed, the quicker you had access to God. So you could have your orgies, you could do have your family orgies as well, you could go out and murder, do everything else, because you're going to have access to the good Lord in a quicker time. And this then continued when the Frankists started, which was an offshoot, and they went into Islam, and that's where you had Wahhabis, the Saud family. So you have the extreme sect, which is nothing like proper Islam. And I've worked with Islam. David Pidcock, who was my mentor, he converted to Islam, and I've seen the gentle side to Islam. And I've been, it is nothing what the mainstream media will have you believe. So the Wahhabism is the Saudi, the Saud family, the cruel element we see practicing of Islam. Judaism, they basically infested Judaism, and not the old Jewish religion, but infested and created the Israel state and all the things we've seen there. But they've also infested the Vatican with the Jesuits. So this is the source. It is worth exploring. Sabbatean Frankists. And so if anyone attacks you for daring to mention the banking families of the world, you just turn around and say, "You calls me anti-Semitic?" No. But you look up at Sabatier and Frankists and you'll see where the bloodline comes from that created all these problems. And they hide behind the Jews in Israel. Look how the Jews are being treated at the moment over the vaccines. I mean, these people view us all. Doesn't matter if you're Catholic, Buddhist, Sikh, they just treat it as cows, cattle. They are a cruel bunch. But anyway,
How do you spell Sabbatean?
S-A-P-P-A-T-E-A-N.
Double P.
No, WB. Sierra, Alpha, Bravo, Bravo,
Yeah.
Alpha, Tango, Echo, Alpha, November, Sierra. I think that's how I'd write it. And then Frankis, Foxtrot, well, Frankis. F-R-A-N-K. Frankis. Jolly good. Okay. So, this is the question that the controlled and fake Greens never ever ask. And my God, I've asked enough of them. Because remember, as I said, I was in the Ecology Party for 15 years in the Green Party. And I've been back to the Green Party conference and talked to my old colleagues and others. And I know that they're as ignorant as the MPs. They know nothing. They absolutely know bugger all. It's appalling. And of course, they're now everyone's flavour because they think they're wonderful. They're not. So, this is the question that the controlled and fake Greens ever ask. Why does the human race, that's us, allow a tiny handful of private individuals who have created for themselves their own private central banking system that fraudulently creates money completely out of thin air as debt, decide just how much, or more accurately, just how little money the world has to spend. And you wonder why there's a third world. You wonder why we had to see those pictures at the beginning of poverty in the world. Why? Because there isn't enough money. Why? Because a private cartel of psychopaths decide how much or how little money the world spends. Now, I tell you, I'm not an economist. Now, I was rung up, 7, 8 weeks ago now, because as I said, people on the inside ring me up who are on our side. This is why I believe that when I witnessed a landslip once. Amazing, they had so much rain, I suddenly saw a tree going like that as a landslip happened. Now, if you imagine raindrops falling on the ground, that's truth. And there's going to come a tipping point when suddenly the ground gives. And, you know, they know that what's happened to those Canadian truckers. The tipping point is coming closer. And I got this phone call, and I'm about to mention about the Bradbury in a minute, but 10 years ago I got a phone call, and I'll describe the phone call when we get to the Bradbury. But 10 years ago I've known about The Secret. And I've done my best as one individual trying to persuade people, but you're up against economists. Oh, you can't do that, you'll have hyperinflation. If you know. And I've had all the conventional economists have a go at me, and you know, I'm the Austrian School of Economics, I know what's going on. Oh, I'm on, you know, and I get all these academics, these clever dicks, where they're lacking one thing, they lack common sense. And he said to me, well, why haven't you made any progress? And I said, well, I'm up against some of these professional economists. I'm not an economist, you know I'm as thick as two short planks. He said, well, you've got common sense. I said, no, I haven't got common sense. He said, well, he's staring at you. He said, the entire financial system of the world, all the private stock markets, the money markets, all the ways, he said, they're all in private hands. It's privately controlled. Unelected, unaccountable people who are not accountable to anyone except their shareholders and other people who've got money. We've been hearing about BlackRock and the other one, Vanguard. I mean, it's all in-house. We, the people, have no bloody say at all about money creation and money supply. He said you can shut any economist up by pointing that one fact out, because they can't answer back. It's all criminal. And I was going, yeah, okay, he's right. And that was only 7 or 8 weeks ago, so I've now shifted my onus of attack, because no economist can stand up to that. It doesn't matter whether Keynesian, Austrian school, new economics, whatever. The truth is, it's all in private hands, hands which are private and unaccountable, secretive, just like the Bank for International Settlement, and we're all slaves to it. So it's time we woke up. England actually admitted the fraud. I love it. They actually put, this is in 2014, in their spring edition, and here it is. In the modern economy, most money takes the form of bank deposits. But how those bank deposits are created is often misunderstood. The principal way is through commercial banks making loans. Whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. It's not based on anything. It's not based on assets or gold or anything. It's just a ledger exercise. Huh? I mean, if you and I did that, we go to prison and eat porridge for quite a few years. So why the hell do we allow it? Because of our collective ignorance. It's incredible. And this is the big secret. Now, the simple truth, the private central bankers and their fake green supporters don't want you to know. This is the proven historical fact. Any sovereign nation can create, issue and control debt-free and interest-free money through its treasury that is based entirely on the nation's wealth and labour potential, creativity, so as to meet the needs, security and prosperity of our nation. Now, this is where I'll come into my little story about the Bradbury Pound. I had actually come across in my research, because I was working, not working paid for, I was just helping support them because they're good, UK column. And there was a newspaper in those days, and I know Brian Gerrish and all the others, and I was trying to understand money, because my uncle had given me these warnings, and I'd met people on the inside, and I knew that banking wasn't right. And I came across an American writer who's a lawyer called Ellen Brown, E-L-L-E-N, Ellen Brown. And she wrote about the greenback dollar, Abraham Lincoln, and how Abraham Lincoln was advised when the American Civil War was going on. They were told that effectively the Treasury had no money, and they were going to have to pay for the munitions, the soldiers, keep their own economy going. He said, we're in deep doo-doo, Mr. President, we've got no money. And along come, I forgot the name of the guy now, who's a colonel. He said, Mr. President, it's simple. You create the money based on I love this, the integrity of the US government, of the government of the North. I mean, if you imagine today creating money based on the integrity of our present government, you wouldn't have enough to buy a McDonald's. I wouldn't want one, but you know what I mean. I mean, all right, Boris would have a party, we could probably, yeah, anyway. The truth is, integrity, it wasn't quite right. What he meant was on the value of what the American North was paid for, what it was worth. And so they created the greenback dollar. And it was called greenback because on one side it was green, on the other side it was grey. And that was debt-free, interest-free, treasury money, not through any private bank. And everyone was happy with it. The soldiers were happy with it. The munition suppliers were happy with it. The people leading their local economies were happy with it. And everybody seemed content. So the greenback dollar worked. But after the war, the private central banks moved in and things didn't become so obvious. And of course, Abraham Lincoln lost his life. He was assassinated. Now, this is where my memory bank sometimes lets me down, so we'll see how I get on. 4 US presidents have died by the bullet. Can you name them?
JFK.
This is where you're going to help me. I should write them down, you know. It'll come back. McKinley was another one.
Lincoln.
No, Lincoln we got, McKinley,
JFK.
JFK, and there's one, it'll always come to me. You know, I was having, on my way here tonight, I was thinking, oh God, the dementia's coming in. I can't remember half the names. I usually get all 4, but it'll come to me whilst we're talking.
Wasn't Reagan?
No, Reagan was shot at. But all these 4 US presidents had something in common. They all took on the central bankers. Now, in the case of John F. Kennedy, he and his brother Bobby decided to bypass the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank, under the BIS, under the Bank for International Settlements, and they decided to go to the Treasury to create debt-free, interest-free notes, Treasury notes, based on their silver gilt stocks that they held. And strangely, a few months later, John F. K. was gunned down, and his brother Bobby was also gunned down. Just coincidence, okay? But 4 US presidents have all died by the bullet, and all 4, over a period of time, took on the central bankers, or took on the bankers. So that's just, you know, I'm still alive, thank goodness. Obviously don't view me as being very serious. So please, if anyone has a shot at me tonight, just be careful. Anyway, but no, that is true. Now, so what we're looking at here is the big secret. Now, what happened to me, I wrote an article for the UK column, and they published it, and that was fine. And my article was, why can't we have a greenback pound? Why can't we have a greenback pound? The same principle. Now, I was this is in about September 2012, and the phone went. My wife was in the kitchen, my daughter was doing her homework, and I thought, oh God, I better answer the phone. So I did. And I thought, oh God, if it's one of my wife's friends, that means I'll be in the kitchen watching all the pans and, you know, anyway. And I said, hello. And it's a very posh voice said, oh, hello, is that Justin Walker? So I said, it might be. And he said, well, I'm just put your mind at rest. Are you the nephew of the late Lord Pilkington? I said, yes. He said, marvellous. He said, I'm ringing on behalf of my father. He's not long for this world. He's on his deathbed. But he wants you to know the word Bradbury. Now, I panicked now, because my laptop was closed. I looked by the phone, no paper, no pen. Oh God, Bradbury. He just told me Bradbury. So I breathed on the window and wrote Bradbury. It's true, it's absolutely Bradbury. He said, now, you're not going to be able to trace this call. It's probably, you won't be able to trace it. But my father wants you to research the word Bradbury because this is the big secret in the City of London. If you research this, you will find the solution to all of Britain's economic woes. He said, it's been very nice talking to you. I haven't said a word. He said, you won't be able to trace this call, but anyway, goodbye. Click. 1471 on to withheld. What's all that about? And I suddenly felt like one of his heroes in one of his, you know, like Hannah in the 39 Steps. You know, what have I just been told? Oh, Bradbury. Eventually the laptop opened up. Bradbury. Yeah, Bradbury. Okay, Bradbury. Who's the name of that lady who walks along old disused railway lines in a rather attractive lady? What's it called? Bradbury. Someone? Julia Bradbury. So I got Julia Bradbury. Is she the solution to all of Britain's economic woes? No, move on. Oh, Bradbury. Martian Chronicles. Science fiction. Oh, no. So I was thinking, oh my God, Bradbury. And I wrote it down by this time. And then I came across a guy called Thomas Johnston. And Thomas Johnston was a MP, joined the 1930s. He was a Labour MP up in Glasgow. And he was, and wait for this, an honourable MP. Ooh, unique. He's actually got quite a legacy. He is actually known as the father of Scottish hydroelectric power. During the Second World War, Churchill entrusted him to look after Scotland in his all-party government. And Thomas Johnston didn't like financial skullduggery. And he wrote a book called The Financiers and the Nation. And in chapter 9 it described usury in the Great War. You can actually look at this, Financiers and the Nation, it's actually online, you can actually get it. It's not very easy to read. You can actually buy the book. I forgot to bring the book tonight. I usually show everyone, look, this is the book, this is the wonderful book, I forgot to bring it. And when you read it, he didn't actually mention the name Bradbury, which is interesting. He just talked about treasury notes. And this is the story of the Bradbury pound. At the outbreak, when we were at the outbreak in 1914, we were on the gold standard, which meant basically, just wait 1 second. Freeze, there you are, you can edit it now. We were on the gold standard, which basically meant that we were backed by gold. So as gold went up or down, it made the value of what your notes were worth and what have you. Now, the treasury, change in your pocket, I haven't got any on me, but the change in your pocket, the loose change, is created by the treasury. And it's called M0, monetary naught, at 2.6%, something like that. And that basically means the treasury creates the coinage, okay? The notes in your pocket are created by the Bank of England. What does it say on them? Promise to pay the bearer the sum of. It is an IOU note. It's created out of fresh air. We've already seen what they said, right? And there was nothing different in 1914. So all the £5 notes that were out there, and I better just explain at this time that a pound in 1914 is the equivalent today of £121. Think about that. So somebody gave you a tip of £1, oh, it's worth a lot of money. 10 shillings, half of that. So you can understand it's fine. But you had a thing called the gold sovereign, and the gold sovereign was the sort of unit that they measured in. Now, at the outbreak of the First World War, there was a degree of panic because this is going to be a global war. And the market started to crash, and people saw the uncertainty of the war, and they thought paper money wouldn't be worth anything, because it's all IOU notes. We want to exchange our IOU notes for gold sovereigns. We want to get the money out. £1 gold sovereigns. We want our money out. Or 50, 10 bob gold sovereigns. So they wanted to get their money out. So they started forming queues. And literally there were queues outside the ordinary high street banks, and there were queues outside the City of London. This is on August the 4th, 1914. There was obviously going to be a run on the banks, because the banks didn't have enough gold. Why? All the banks are privately controlled, remember? There's nothing to do with the treasury, they are privately controlled. They had basically created more paper money than they actually had in their vaults. Fractional reserve lending is the polite term. Any normal person just calls it fraud. Okay? So there was a run on the banks. And, what are we going to do? So I'm trying to remember the name of the governor then, but they will come back to me. But running around to David Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and said, look, Chancellor, we've got a problem. Run of the banks, collapse. City of London going to go down. You won't be able to rearm for the war. And, it's all terrible. You're going to have to do something. And in 2 days, they passed the Currency Notes and Coins Act through Parliament in 2 days, Emergency Act, which authorised, and I'm going to take this picture now, which authorised the first batch of Treasury notes, and they're the first batch. They were printed on stamp paper in £1 denomination and 10 shillings. They were called Bradburys. They were signed by Sir John Bradbury, who was the first Secretary to the Treasury, Permanent Secretary to the Treasury. And they were printed on one side only, on stamp paper. And this really was a panic, because what they did was, August the 3rd was a bank holiday. So they then shut down the banks for 4 days. And I've actually seen the signs, you can actually see them. The bank is shut, blah, blah, stop you going to get your money out. This is what's going to happen today. And this is why I tell you to keep cash in your house, because if the bank suddenly sees something bad, electronically you can just switch everything off. This is what makes me laugh about all these people who believe in high tech and everything else. It can just be switched off. And we've seen what happens when a bank has a problem, a so-called tech problem. You can't get your money out, your car's useless. Keep cash in the bank with what's coming. Keep cash in the home, I should say. Keep cash in the home with what's coming. Anyway, so in 4 days, they managed to completely issue a whole lot of paper money from the Treasury, debt-free and interest-free, because it's based on the wealth, the credit of the nation, and the labour potential. That's the creativity of the nation. Currently today, according to the Office of National Statistics, but if you add up the labour potential with your assets, the nation, we're worth approximately just over 30 trillion. We were pre-COVID, it'll probably be about the same now, around 30 trillion pounds. That's what we're worth. So, suddenly the government was creating the money to fund the war. And this is the first batch of notes, and they were ready by August the 7th. So all the queues, they went in there, and when it was explained to them that this was treasury money based on the wealth of the nation, everyone was happy. And as dear old Thomas Johnson said, and nobody talked about inflation. There was no sudden inflation. If you talk to the Austrian School of Economics and the Keynesian School of Economics and all the others, said, oh, you can't just produce money like that, you will get inflation. Oh, my dear fellow, you'll get hyperinflation. You only get that when you've got the nasty people in Wall Street and the George Soroses of this world and people like that who are playing the market to achieve the aims they want. Good normal people and common sense and wisdom, you do not get that. So the Bradbury saved the day. There was no run on the banks. Everyone went away happy. The money, basically what had happened was we mobilised the money to fight the war. We mobilised our wealth to fight the war. Well, they issued, I think it was, I've got to get my memory back now, I've got to write this down. But anyway, I think they issued 200 million, whatever it was, it worked out in today's money at £35 billion worth of money they created in 1914 to fight the war, to mobilise, to munitions, everything else, and to keep the markets afloat because there was trade with neutral countries and all sorts. So there was a huge amount to do. But the point was, no running up the national debt. Now, the bankers said, oh, thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd George, you've saved the bacon. However, we'd like a quick meeting with you. Now, can we get one thing straight? You're not going to carry on fighting the war, are you? Just creating money based on the wealth of the nation? You've got to go back to the old system of selling bonds to us, and we buy the bonds, and we charge 3.5% interest, or whatever it is, and let's get back to the old way of doing things. So we build up the national debt. And David Lloyd George climbed down. And it's one of the great mysteries that we're still trying. I've got two alternative historians at the moment sniffing around this. You know, why did David Lloyd George cave in? I won't go into details now, but it is like a bit of a detective story. But I will tell you one amusing thing. Dan Snow. You've all seen Dan Snow. Well, in 1914, when they were doing the centenary of the First World War, they said, how did Britain pay for the First World War? Strange this, no mention of the Bradbury pound whatsoever. What they did talk about were the people, the British people, buying bonds and popping their money through the slit holes of tanks. When we created tanks, they were sticking tanks in the middle of town hall, outside town halls and outside city halls. You had tanks, and people were queuing up to pop money in and getting a bond back, and you were going to get told you got 3% interest or whatever it was after the war. So, as far as Dan Snow was concerned, David Lloyd George didn't do it. Bradbury, it was just that's the way you do it. Now, it just so happened that I'd actually been twittering with Dan Snow about an ancestor of mine who was a general, he won the VC and various other things. So he was actually responding. So when I read this, I tweeted to him, I said, Dan, my dear fellow, have you not heard the Bradbury pound? Look at that. Silence. Dan, look at the Bradbury pound, look, it saved the nation in 1914. Silence. I got suspicious. So I did a bit of research on Dan Brown and the Snow family. Turns out his maternal great-grandfather, or was it great-great-grandfather, was David Lloyd George. You couldn't make it up. Wow. Keep it in-house. This is suppressed history. This has been airbrushed from the public consciousness. I just thought this is incredible. The Bradbury pound, if you went online, and I did, looking up Bradbury, I found collectors, money collectors were buying Bradbury notes. In fact, here we are. I've actually got one. It cost me 60 quid. Go on the market at something like £1,000, £2,000. You know, they are highly collectible, says he now, hoping to God he still got it. Oh, here we are, thank God for that. I thought somebody, there you are. There's a genuine, it's the second edition. There you are, Bradbury pound. Is that a conspiracy theory? No, you can see it. It happened. Look, it's there. Physical. But according to the economists, never happened. No. And then, of course, when we used to write to the politicians about it, we'd get a standard reply back saying, oh, we can't do that now because that's in breach of regulations by the EU. We're not in the bloody EU now, so we don't bother replying at all. They really, genuinely do not want to talk about the Bradbury pound and the Treasury creating money at 100%. They do it for your change in your pocket, but not at 100%, so everything is paid for by basically mobilising a percentage of your nation's wealth to create the liquidity needed to provide, well, I'll go into details in a minute. But, oh, by the way, there's Brian Gerrish. We had a demonstration one budget day. It was about 100 of us went down, and there's his, I love that, the red thing, and that's our symbol for the campaign, the Bradbury pound. And we are going to get going on this again, because this is just the truth. And these are, that's the second batch, that's the third batch, I think it is. So there you are, there's the Bradbury pound in all its glory. Now, if the Bradbury pound was restored today, good, excellent, well done. Right, what would a restored Bradbury pound do for all of us today? What would happen? Well, austerity cutbacks would be annulled with immediate effect. Now, I did write this about 3 years ago, but you can see what I'm getting at. You'd have no austerity, you would have none of that problem. All forms of direct taxation, all forms of direct taxation would come to an end. Income tax, all the complex ways and invasive ways that politicians like to control it. Think about it. Politicians, what do? Well, they think about how much they're going to tax you. That's what they spend most of their lives doing. Well, they're going to lose their jobs because there's nothing to do there. Indirect taxation may be a way of retiring money, but direct taxation, no. The NHS, along with the vulnerable and elderly in social care, would have all the resources needed. No ifs, no buts, get on with it, give people quality of life. Student fees would be abolished. Education at all levels would be free. Students already in debt would have their debts annulled. Simple. The armed services and the police service would be restored to the levels needed for our country's sovereignty, security and safety. You'll get your Bobby on the beat again. Simple. People would be encouraged to set up their own human-scale businesses whilst at the same time greatly increasing the number of apprenticeships for young people. That's it. We'd get people working again at a human-scale level. Shipbuilding, steelmaking and other strategically important industries would be protected and given a new lease of life. No. Finally, roads, railways, power stations and other vital infrastructure for the nation would be maintained and constructed to very high levels of standard. Because if you imagine, if we're worth 30 trillion approximately, you just put 1-2 trillion into the economy, what would that do? If you had politicians, or if you had governance by the people, for the people, and not by the bankers, for the bankers, or is that blankers? Did I get that right? Anyway, but you see what I'm getting at? We have a person, how many people in here have heard of a gentleman called the City Remembrancer? Oh, I always like the clever dicks. There are two of them have, well done. City Remembrancer. I wish I had a picture of him. I don't think I have, which is very remiss of me. This man, he looks like something out of Alice in Wonderland. He's got a funny wig, he sits there, he's got all the tiled floor in front of him. I wish I had a picture. It's so humorous, you can't take it seriously. But this man represents the City of London. And one of the City of London's privileges, ancient privileges, since 1571, the City Remembrancer is allowed to sit with our MPs in the House of Commons. What is he there to do? Well, they try and give you the vision that he's there to some sort of chivalry and some sort of, what's the word, ceremonial. He's not. He's there to make sure politicians don't ask about how is money created and by whom? What is money supply? What's the Bank for International Settlements? What? Nobody knows. And he is there to basically contain too much enthusiasm by MPs on money creation and money supply. The City Remembrancer. Nobody knows about him. I love it. The secrecy, it's just like things have been airbrushed out altogether.
Is that the name of the person who works for the Corporation of London?
Yes, he's employed by the corporation.
Is he only non-MP in the House?
No, he's employed by, he is literally put with our MPs
right.
to have influence.
Yeah, but he works for the Corporation
Yeah.
of London.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going back to my fake greens because this is how I feel strongly, but as a green, I've seen my colleagues hijacked by the bankers. Fake greens have completely and unlawfully turned their backs on our ancient and thoroughly proven common law trial by jury constitution. Now, this is why I'm coming on to the second part, because this is something else that the Greens now have forgotten, and it's imperative that we remember this, because if you're going to have money for the people, by the people, etc., you've got to have the law courts, for the people, by the people, etc., etc., etc. So we've got to return justice back to the people, not back to the judges who support the City of London. So we have turned our back on on common law because the Greens and others all practice statute-based Roman civil law, which basically means you have a judge in court, no jury, and it's in contrary to everything that our ancient traditions tell us since Magna Carta, and well before then, the Anglo-Saxons, and well before then, the tribal days. It is a jury of your peers decide, having heard the case in a fair way, whether you are guilty or not guilty. It's as simple as that. And we've turned our back to a very large extent with magistrates, county courts where judges hold forth, family courts where judges hold. I mean, we've just completely lost the fact that we are a common law country. Great Charter, Magna Carta 1215. And there are some people trying to say that 1215 Magna Carta is bogus because King John was under duress. He didn't have to seal it because he shouldn't have done. Well, I'm sorry, that man was an evil bastard. There was nothing nice about King John. I've tried to revise, history, you can revise history, but every time I do try to say, is there a nice side to King John? Because you like to think you've only been sold one side. I have yet to find it. And I challenge anyone else to find a nice side to King John. And my daughter was doing the family tree, and I've discovered that a father and son, 2 knights, were actually at Runnymede on that date, who were distant relatives of mine. So I like to feel it's in my DNA, the Great Charter. Okay, Britain is a common law country. All trials of justice must involve a jury of randomly selected people. The judge is only there to ensure that the trial is conducted in a fair and proper way. The jury decides not only about what the verdict is, but what the sentence may be. A jury has the absolute right to trigger the process needed to annul bad and unjust legislation passed by Parliament. And despite what the politicians may think, we, the people, are sovereign and not Parliament.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make this comment to you. By the time you've heard me tonight, and you know what's coming, and the truckers in Canada are chasing around and having fun, and the people are starting to get rather agitated and getting ready to rise up, peacefully I hope, let's say the future governance of our country, I ask 2 questions. Do we need professional politicians, and do we need political parties? And I think we have got to seriously think about both those issues, because those bodies are only there to protect the bankers. Well, it is these self-serving and ambitious individuals who are now falling over themselves to support the fake green climate agenda. And when I say climate, and I wrote it, I also, obviously COVID hadn't started, so I apologise I haven't updated these things. Are we suspicious? And remember, these fake greens have shut down all scientific debate with those terrible climate deniers. Notice the word denier to link us with the Holocaust. As has the BBC and virtually all the deep state as a thoroughly controlled and agenda-driven mainstream media. Now, when I wrote that, that was all to do with climate change. Since I wrote that, of course, COVID. The BBC openly tell you that they will not accept another side to the COVID debate. They will not accept another side to the climate debate. And of course, climate, it morphed from man-made global warming into climate. So a climate denier is a very strange. Am I denying there's something going on out there? It's so stupid and childish. But the BBC and ITV, all of them have shut off any debate. Well, tell me the difference between the BBC shutting off debate and Hitler burning books. Tell me the difference. There is none. It's a fascist movement. It's a fascist action. So, that in itself tells us there's something desperately wrong when the other side cannot debate with us. Zoom call last night with doctors and scientists and stuff. They were talking stuff well above me. I mean, as I said to you, I am a thicko. I've just got one thing, I hope, common sense. But the rest of me, I'm not good. I was hearing scientists who clearly know their facts. Have they got access to the mainstream media? No. And they know it. And they're now working with us. And the very fact they had David Icke on, and they're starting to wake up to what the realities of things going on. It's incredible. I mean, I can remember being with David, and you go into a room, and there'd be 3 people, and the rest are just empty chairs. What that guy went through, being laughed at and mocked and in the streets, now people can't get enough of him. And it's fantastic. I warm to him because he bloody deserves it.
6,000 in Wembley.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 of those.
Yeah, I know. So, I take off my hat to David. Right, here we are. Now, these are the 17 sustainable goals put out by the United Nations. Okay, so this all looks brilliant. Look, no poverty, 0 hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, the all-seeing eye, notice, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnerships for goals, sustainable development goals. I tell you, there's one missing. There's one missing. Number 18. I actually wrote a thing on this, and I'm going to challenge them. Number 18. You know what it might be? No?
Fair finance.
No? Well, yes, you're getting there. People-controlled money creation and money supply, and people-owned banks. Take away the private sector.
Well, in a way, you've actually then eliminated the problems of a lot.
Correct! You wiped the lot out! Exactly! It's the one ball that gets rid of all the skittles! I love it! And that's why you'll never see the 18th goal. To put people back in charge of money.
They've left the gap for it there.
Yeah. I know, I can't, don't worry, I'm going to have more fun with that. Now, I don't know what my last slide is, or my last slide, yeah. Okay, here we are. Henry Ford, I love this.
Oh, yeah.
It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning.
Let's take it a little longer.
And this is the key to what I call the pushback strategy. Because everything I've told you tonight, yes, you are an informed audience. Out there, they have no idea about this. And it's factual. As I could wave the Bradbury pan, it's all factual. And the other side have not got an argument. Since we withdrew from the EU, they can't even say, oh, we can't do that because the European Union won't let us. Well, we're not in the European Union. You know, I mean, they don't know what to do. They don't bother replying now. I've written to all the Treasury Select Committee. I even wrote to the Speaker of the House. I've written to them all. Chancellor, Chancellor, the Shadow Chancellor. No response whatsoever. And I write polite letters. I don't call them toe rags. I don't call them anything. I just write very polite. I always sign off by saying with all best wishes. May not mean it, but I signed it. You know, they can't accuse me of being vexatious, because that's what they like to do. If they get too many too many on the same subject, you're being vexatious. I'm answering that. Sorry. You know, this is what's so crazy about our society. But once people wake up to money creation and money supply, and how it's all in the hands of private people, private institutions, unelected, unaccountable, secret, and they have all the little secret groups and everything else. Once people understand that, I tell you, I mean, we're going to have a job stopping lynchings. I mean, I don't like death and carnage, so I personally will be saying, no, fair trial. Actually, I've already come up with an idea. Well, two ideas, actually. The first one is for Tony Blair.
Seems okay.
Yeah, I've got a spot. There's a particular dungeon in the Tower of London I've got reserved for him. Thames is seeping in. There's a few rodents skipping around the place. And I'm going to put a bloody great big television in there. There's going to be a chair. He'll sit there, and he'll think, what's on telly? The camera will be on him. The only thing he'll be able to watch is him. Getting older. That's psychological. And of course, under the Bill of Rights, we're not to have cruel punishments. But I think that might be allowed. The other punishment is there was an island off Scotland used for anthrax. I wonder where all the bankers are going. But dear old Henry Ford. Now, I love this quote. It's a bit... Thomas Jefferson did have some slaves, but apparently he did look after them, but still a bit dicey. But nonetheless, he wrote this. When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. So I think that is the last slide. It is. So I'm just going to round off and say, look, the strategy is simple. We've got to, and by the way, we're putting out papers. I've got a video being prepared. I've got a 30-minute read, which I'm just rounding off. We've got a 5-minute read that's being done. We're getting stuff, so we're going to email this out to everybody. And essentially we're just saying, look, if we want to push back the state, we've got to worry them where they don't want to be worried. The Achilles heel. And the Achilles heel is showing that our government and our politicians do not work for the people. They work for the bankers, the City of London, the Bank for Internet. These organisations that people have never heard of. And there's not a conspiracy theory in the room. This is all facts. So this is the simple pushback strategy. We inform people what the truth is about money creation and money supply. Thank you very much.
Great.
A standing ovation. Thank you very much. Now, I want you to stress test what I've just told you, because I always tell people, for God's sake, don't believe I could be a liar. I could be making all things up. You've got to go away and research it. The stuff is out there. Have fun researching. And of course, real history. I actually take time off at night to actually look at history and trying to weave out what happened. I'm at the moment doing the First World War because of the Bradbury. and because of David Lloyd George, I'm actually trying to dig into what the bankers were doing. And by the way, do you ever wonder why Switzerland was never invaded? Now, I'm going to let you into a little secret. I used to, I did play around with soldiering. I played around in the yeomanry, in the territorial army for 10 years, and I was God's gift to soldiering at the weekend. And as I said to people earlier, I was only shot at once, and that was by my own men, but I was with the colonel, so I'd like to think they were aiming at him, not me. The truth is, I used to believe that the Swiss defence system was so magnificent, so decentralised, and the Swedish call it the tank in the barn policy. In other words, every little village has its own little grouping. And yes, it would be hard to take over. But the truth is, Hitler had superb Alpine troops. That's why they took Greece. That's why they went into Yugoslavia. That's why they moved into... Switzerland would not have been a problem for them. But I used to believe that that was the reason why Switzerland was never invaded. The truth is that Switzerland, for all the William Tell, and you always think of William Tell, and you think of democracy and accountability and referendum, and you think that Switzerland is an example, a shining example of people being in charge.
Cuckoo clock.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the truth is, the Switzerland is the nest for the worst people. Basically, look, the United Nations, World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, Davos, everything that is bad in the world is either in the City of London or in Switzerland. Now, you could argue the Vatican, but I would just say Vatican defence. I went on a holiday once. I was representing the Ecology Party, and I went to the Vatican, first time in my life, and I called them clipboard priests. And I didn't like what I saw. It was cold, it was calculating, it was manipulating, it was exploitative. But then I went to Assisi, and I had one of the happiest days of my life. They had all the religions of the world. Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, Catholics, everybody was there. And it was a celebration of life, ecology, and St. Francis of Assisi. And I spent one of the weirdest times of my life sitting next door to an American, real-life Friar Tuck. He was massive, bald-headed, he was jovial, ha-ha, and he was quizzing me about the Ecology Party and everything we stood for, the values as it was in those days, real ecology and everything else. And then he was translating it to his Italian brethren. And he was eating an ice cream that big, covered in Italian liqueur. It was lovely. That was a religion I could buy into. And everyone was happy. Everyone wanted to share information. And it was just love. I'm joking a bit. It really was fantastic. That's what we're going back to. That's what's coming back to us. Look, I want to take questions. Fire things at me.
So you, with the pushback, are you going to the police, like with the Mark Sexton case, with the whole...
Yeah, there are a lot of people doing things like that. Yes,
yeah. So do you have like a caseload that we can also take to the...
Well, lots of other groups are. Yeah, lots of other groups are. I better just introduce the Hardwick Alliance a little bit more. And I've got a few leaflets here. The Hardwick Alliance, I call ourselves, Julian, he laughed when I told him, I said, we want to become a new Bilderberg group. The only thing is we are going to be totally transparent, totally honest, and totally open. No secrets. We are just a grouping of about 100 people who online have a forum. We talk about 5G, we talk about all the dangerous things going on, we talk about money, yes, we talk about everything. We come up with ideas, but most importantly, we swap information, send it out to other groups and stuff. We're going to enhance that. I mean, the most important thing is, it is all about communication, and we want to be seen as being safe, because there's a lot of mistrust in the movement, and I do know there are some people like Positive Money out there pretending what they're not, and we know there's controlled opposition, but the people in Hardwick and elsewhere, I've been at this game for 30 odd years, so I finally got a feel, like David Icke. In fact, I've always said that when David started on his journey, I was a few steps behind him, except he was one who was really finding out, and I was merely listening to what he said, and, But I've had my strange experiences too. I've had one or two strange experiences, and which makes you suddenly realise that life is not quite what it seems. I won't go into all that now, but yeah, I've had one or two going, that's strange, or coincidences and all sorts of things like that. The universe is there, and I do think the universe is going to provide. I genuinely believe that. I think the universe provided the truckers because I didn't see that coming. And it's fantastic. And of course, they're now trying to set up convoys in Finland, Sweden, everywhere else.
5th of February in the UK.
Yeah, I think
Australia's
so.
just started as well.
Justin, how can we keep in touch and particularly get the material that you're just in the process of releasing?
That's a very good question. I'm wondering if I ought to get a pen and a paper and here tonight, and you can write down your emails and stuff, and I'll make sure you get it. Says he now, thinking, has he got any paper?
Oh,
good. Have you got a pen as well?
I've got a book I can have.
Oh, excellent. There's it. You see, come off the man, come off the hour. There you are. Brilliant. Yeah, that would be brilliant if you could do that. But seriously, I genuinely believe we're living at a very, very exciting time. I don't know what your own personal beliefs are, spiritual beliefs, everybody else, but I do believe we're all here to do our bit. We don't need leaders. We don't need politicians. Brian Gerrish always describes us as a very light hand on the tiller, because we don't want the other side to infiltrate and to basically, make us go backwards. And I know Marcus, he's doing here, we have to do it at a local level. It's up to, we want to be, I don't like the military methods, I do tend to use them, but we want to be a guerrilla army, because that's the only way they can't control us. And we want to be groups. It doesn't matter what, one of the things I say in this pushback strategy when I write it is that, look, I don't want to see us all joining together to become one organisation with a hierarchy. If you do that, we're lost, because they'll infiltrate us. What we do perhaps want is a song sheet. We can all sing in harmony, but we all sing in different groups all over the bloody place, because they haven't got the numbers.
Yeah.
They may have the technology, but for those of us who can back cleverly, we don't even use the technology, as you saw my little phone. I don't like making life easy for them. At the moment, I'm a bit of a chateau general. I've done 30 years stomping, going out doing meetings and stuff. This is my first release. In fact, my wife said, "Where are you going tonight?" I said, "I'm going out to give a talk." "Are you? Where are you going?" She thinks I've got a mistress. Yes. Any offers? Anyway, no. She doesn't give me enough pocket money. You'll get a bag of chips. That's all you'll get. But anyway, God, if she sees this video, I'm dead.
Edit that, please.
No, but seriously, I'm very happy. We've got a blind dog at the moment, and it's 24/7 looking after him. So my job is stroking the dog, making sure he doesn't fall off his tee, and doing my research and writing and stuff. It works. And I live in a lovely part of the world where, you've got fresh air and you can go out and, so I tend to be a bit of a chateau general at the moment. But what is so important now is just groups starting, friends getting together, workmates. And the word is freedom. That is the word that unites, and people will agree to freedom. They may not know the full extent of what we're talking about, but they're open to hearing, because it's all part of that freedom process. And when you describe to them, it's so easy. As I said, I'm not an economist, but if I can describe how the bankers operate, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And that's how I measure. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And if you saw my academic record at school, you know. I barely scraped my 2 A-levels to get the army to be interested in me. Barely scraped them. Grades D and E. History and ancient history. And even then I didn't answer all the questions. Anyway, come on, some more questions. Fire at me.
With the convoy, obviously on the surface it looks great. I was concerned, obviously you all heard that part of their plan was to crush the economy. Isn't this just playing straight into their hands?
Well, left to me, I would agree, because if you know you've got the Bradbury, or the Canadians did actually have an aversion of the Bradbury. They were actually, it's only up until quite recently that they stopped creating treasury money. I don't know all the ins and outs and details, but knowing as I do that, one of the interesting things I'm looking at the moment is that if we know that our government is corrupt and it is basically in league with the bankers, the City of London and the criminals, and they should be creating money to keep all the economy afloat, to keep the people happy, all the services met, everything needed, and they're not, then surely under the common law you have to do your own.
Yeah.
And one of the things I haven't mentioned tonight is, there's two currencies I can talk about. One is a thing called colonial scrip, S-C-R-I-P, colonial scrip. And this was the real reason for the American War of Independence. Now, colonial scrip was essentially paper money created by the colonists in the 1740s, 50s, 60s. And it was just paper money based on the wealth of the colony. So Massachusetts did their own, Pennsylvania did theirs, whatever. And that was to basically transfer business. So everyone was happy and everyone was, they weren't part of the gold standard, they weren't part of the City of London, they didn't have to borrow money from the banks, there was no interest. They just had this money manoeuvring around the state and everyone was happy. In those days it was to, you know, for furniture to be made, candles to be made, food to be bought, you know, a bit of oil, you know, whatever it was simple, but it worked, and the people had enough money, so there was no poverty in the colonial states. And oh God, who was the guy? Name of the guy? One of the founding fathers. He was the one who got electrocuted and tried to put a kite up in the sky.
Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin. Thank you very much. You see, I'm not having a good day for tonight, remembering names. Benjamin Franklin came over. The story goes, and I've read the book. Benjamin Franklin came over and he was cross-examined by the bankers. Why? What's going on? He said, well, we have this colonial scrip. And this is what the Americans, or this is what the bankers tried to do. They passed a bill through Parliament outlawing colonial scrip. So when you read, oh, it's all about the Boston Tea Party. And who were the Indians, in inverted commas? They were Freemasons. What was Benjamin Franklin? A Freemason. Freemasonry kicked in big time. And effectively, the real American War of Independence was all about stopping the colonials and creating their own money. Again, the real history is still to come out. But the other little episode is rather nice, it's rather quaint. And that was on the island of Guernsey, just after the Napoleonic Wars. And Guernsey was pretty exhausted after the Napoleonic Wars. They didn't have, some of the essentials. They wanted to build a customs house. They wanted to improve their harbour facilities. They just wanted to improve the infrastructure needed for their local economy on the island. And they thought, well, we can't afford it. We can't do anything. But the governor of the island looked and he said, right, I've got the manpower, I could do it. We've got the resources on the island, the stone, all the things needed. He said, what we haven't got is the means of exchange. And what is money? Money is simply a medium of goods. It's just a convenient way of goods and services that people have complete confidence in. It's so simple. It's nothing, no rocket science. It's just a simple way of creating a unit of exchange for goods and services that people have complete confidence in. And he decided to do that. He created paper money based on for Guernsey. Only Guernsey. It couldn't be used anywhere else, just Guernsey. And so he created the liquidity, the money needed to exchange for all the supplies, the labour and what have you, to do what they did, and then they retired the money. They took the money out, took it out of the equation. Their buildings, and they got their harbour facilities. It's so simple. It's only idiots and people who have got criminal intent who make things complicated. The more complex something is, the more you know the criminals are hiding. And that's why I haven't mentioned Bitcoin and the other things tonight. I say go ahead, but buyer beware. Just beware. The more complex something is, the more something can go wrong and the criminals can do things. I'm not convinced by cryptocurrencies. I know a lot of people are. Some people are, and they've made a lot of money. Maybe that's a way of entrapping people. Well, I will warn you one thing. The people who want the central bank digital currencies are only too happy for people to go down that path, because you're taking cash out of society. So I just say to people, buyer beware. Beware of that. But for when it comes for goods and services, when it comes to the infrastructure of the country, when it comes to what is needed to make life habitable for all of us, then we use the principle of the Bradbury, and we don't have any dealings whatsoever with the private bankers. They are history, or they will be history by the time we've finished. Okay. Any more questions? Come on, throw something at me. Throw a googly at me, so I don't know what I'm going to say.
What actually happened to the Bradbury?
Oh, that's a good. I didn't answer. Yeah, the Bradbury. Well, interesting. They didn't phase it out immediately. The last Bradbury was actually created, I think, in about 1926, 27, something like that. I've actually seen a note, which was about 1926. They just cut it down, right down. And by the way, the national debt, just to give you some idea of how the crooks operated, bear in mind what I said, that £1 is equal to £121 today. The national debt, in their money at the time, was £650 million at the outbreak of the First World War. In 1919, at the Treaty of Versailles, after the First World War, it was 7,500 million. Now, had the Bradbury been used, and the historians and the You know, they have no answer to this. It's fact. All you're doing, if you've got the wealth, if you know what you're worth, you take a percentage of it and say, right, that is going to become liquidity now, so we've got a flourishing economy. Simple. As I said, if I can understand it, anyone can understand it. But unfortunately, the London School, oh, by the way, I'd shut down the London School of Economics. How many bloody rogues going around the country, wrecking our country and the world, have been to the London School? No one's been to the London School of Economics. I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but it is true. It's not good. Yeah, and by the way, do you know who started the London School of Economics? The Fabians. And what's the Fabian symbol? What is it, a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Blair was a big Fabian, wasn't
Imperial College was that one.
Yeah, so, and of course, actually, and this is going to be controversial, I want to be a little bit controversial. When it comes to the way, the problems in the world, I would probably put at the top bankers as being the first problem. Politicians, I'm not. I'm going to put them number 3. You know, I'm going to put in number 2.
Judiciary?
Academics. Because in fact we've got a lady called Professor Gloria Moss who at this very moment is taking evidence of books and bias in the classroom for our preparatory, you know, for people, young minds, and what they're being told. Look how they've all warmed to Extinction Rebellion and they've been told that. It's been shut down, they're being told one side of history. You know, I mean, take slavery. Nobody wants bloody slavery. I don't want bloody slavery. But with the Black Lives Matter, now all lives matter, so why do people get criticised for saying all lives matter? All lives matter. But this is real history. Who sold black slaves to the white black slaves to the white slave owners, to the white traders, the slave traders? Who? Other black tribes. Now we need to get a grip. Chinese had slaves, the Arabs had slaves, everybody had slaves. We're all bloody guilty as the human race. So let's say that. We're all bloody guilty as the human race. But no, but this is all deliberate psychological warfare on the old brain to get us into a guilt mode. No, human beings have buggered things up. Yes, we've also done some magnificent things, but the truth is, where the buggering comes up, the bloody bankers and the financiers and the people who control are behind the scenes, or the bloodlines, you could argue. I don't know. That may be more controversial. But the truth is, let's make history, let's get the real history out. And when you do, we're all here to make, I believe, a paradise on earth. I genuinely believe we can make a true paradise on earth, and we will be open to new ideas. And, I mean, one of the things we haven't mentioned, we've got all these bloody wind turbines out in the beautiful seascape. What about Tesla? And yet, the word Tesla has been taken over by Elon Musk, a complete psycho. By the way, he's backing the Canadian truckers. I'm not quite sure how he's got that one in his mind, but unless it's just to confuse us. But you look at him, he can't wait to be transhumanified. He wants to stick things in him. Well, I'm happy to stick things in him. Yeah. I'm not getting personal, but you know, I mean, he's really odd, and apparently he's now the world's richest man. And yet I was told he's in debt to the tune of, I don't quite, what you're not supposed to understand it, because that's in the world of finance. And again, but look at Tesla. Great inventions, but no politician, nobody dares to mention, well, hang on a moment, now look at those experiments that Mr. Nikolai Tesla was doing. Let's have a look at those again, shall we? Let's see if there's any more. I've never heard a dicky bird on that. No, you won't, because with that, you'll find solutions.
And people followed him. John Searle, for instance, he had the magnetic motor that Tesla evolved that produced free energy. He was stopped up.
Well, you've got the, I mean, I'm out of my depth because it's science and I'm not a scientist, but out there is the field, energy. So common sense tells me we can probably tap into that. But you say that to politics, oh, no, get those wind turbines up. Oh, look, solar panels everywhere. You know, I'm sorry, we've got a bloody heat pump at home. God, the noise it makes is unbelievable. We moved into a new house. I never thought I'd live in a new house. We've actually got right angles. I've never lived in a house with right angles. and it's a Georgian mock. All right, the land is lovely. You've got a lovely garden. It's all beautiful. Kadir Idris overlooks us and woods, and it's lovely. You've got a river running through it. It's lovely. But I'm living in a house with right angles. And I can't have a wood burner. It's got bloody heat pump. Now, it is brilliant, it works. But what happens to a power cut? I'm buggered. and I can't light a bloody stove. I'm getting a bit, you know, my wife, I said, can we stick a wood-burning stove in the conservatory? Don't you bloody dare! Well, I might want to. You know, I mean, I do like to have fallbacks.
Yeah.
But, you know, seriously, we're not really looking at things properly at all. And Tesla is waiting in the wings, I'm sure of it.
Just a recommendation on that note, if anyone's seen or hasn't seen it yet, Thrive 2 is a brilliant documentary.
Yeah, I've
around
heard,
energy
yeah.
And cures that have been around for ages.
Oh, God, and we haven't even
Cancer.
mentioned cancer. What I mean, again, I tend to
And
go...
the Zimbabwean there is already knocked off the guy that produced the megawatt of power unit that he's been knocked off.
Yeah, things going on. I mean, I think it's about 18 scientists have died who got rather too close to creating free energy and stuff. But, you know, when you look at, I mean, my cousin, bless her, she died from skin cancer. She died of cancer, and it was an experimental chemo that finally killed her, and she agreed to it. But when you, I mean, I did 2 years working for Macmillan Nurses raising money. I joined it. It was my late aunt's appeal to raise money for 4 nurses, and I'm happy to take it on, and it was great fun. I had Jean Alexander was my patron, Fred Dibner. It was lovely. I had a lovely time raising money for Macmillan Nurses. But the truth is, Macmillan Nurses is inside the cancer industry, and it's chemotherapy, radiotherapy, gene therapy, chemotherapy, and surgery, but anything outside that, especially energy, using Royal Raymond Rife, Dr. Royal Raymond Rife, he was a genius. What did they do? They destroyed him. He became an alcoholic. His laboratory was burnt down. But luckily, people are still going on with Rife machines. And I've seen one actually work on somebody who was supposed to have died, and he kept going for another year. And unfortunately, he went into a hospice, and they gave him some painkillers and killed him. But I saw the Rife machine work. They physically broke up the actual core of the, what do you call it, the growth of the tumour, that's the word.
On the internet, which are talking about the quantum financial system and the revaluation. Do you know anything about that?
It sounds complicated, in which case I won't. And I would just say, beware. As soon as I hear that word quantum, I take to the hills. I'm just saying beware. I'm not saying it won't work. And I do know somebody who's created a crypto system to help small businesses join the problems, and it seems to work. So I'm not going to be too critical, because I'm out of my depth. I don't know what I'm talking about. But what I do know is I wouldn't have crypto anywhere near funding for the nation when it comes to the nation's infrastructure, services, and what needs for us to keep going.
On that note, it's quite funny, a lot of the people that are promoting that seem to be able to get huge audiences very, very quickly on new platforms like BitChute, Rumble, etc., etc. Whereas for the rest of us doing alternative media as such, you only ever get up to sort of 400, 500 views, and then it plateaus and completely curtains, that's it really, you don't get any more. So I don't know how these guys, there's Charlie Ward, Simon Parks, Nick Benyon, and all of those guys who get like these huge viewing figures very quickly.
Sorry, I don't want to knock people, but I've heard too much information about those two. And I don't go near them. They're not on my mailing list anyway, but I don't go near them.
They're often talking about QFF, the quantum financial system, the SAR, all of that. But then again, there are others who I listen to, I think, are more genuine, Cliff High being one, and he seems to think that it's
again, the real test is these people who think they're economists and everything else, just ask them the question. Look, the entire system is run by private controlled hands. Surely we should get rid of the system, lock, stock and barrel, and start again. Because that's the only way. You can't tinker with a system that is totally corrupt, because it still ends up being corrupt. Again, is it me? As I said, I wasn't very bright at school, so maybe I've got it all wrong. But the system, to me, it is a case of the system is corrupted because it's all in private hands, unelected, unaccountable, in secret. Then that would suggest to me we don't keep it.
That's the thing with the quantum thing, it's unaccountable still, right? It's just somewhere in the cloud or whatever.
Yeah, well, if it's up in the cloud, it means you can't see what's going on. And I'm afraid there are people who are criminals on the make, and they want those little hiding places where they can stand. Oh, by the way, I wanted to just leave you with one analogy, because I was talking with Joe in the car on the way here, and maybe we ought to use this analogy now, because with what the truckers are doing and people waking up, we need to tell people now that this is a battle between good versus evil. No ifs and buts. But this is the important bit. There's not a wall or a fence between good and evil. There's not something for the politicians to sit on and prevaricate So, oh, I don't know, you know, there's a good point in there, but it's also a good case. No, there's a bloody razor blade. Because there is no, you've got to take your ties out. People have got to decide which side they're on, good or evil. Because that is what, I mean, you've seen the slides, you know what's going on. If people knew the 5G, artificial intelligence, as I said, some of it could be used for good purposes, but if it's in the wrong hands, and it is at the moment, then it's not nice what's coming. It is evil. And when you look at the religions, I got an email and a website, I got an email and a call for action from a religious body that I hadn't, they were Catholics, but Byzantine Catholics. And they were calling the Pope the devil. And they were absolutely outraged by what the Vatican was doing. And these are ancient religions, these are ancient Greece.
Have you seen his audience chamber in Vatican?
Oh, the one with the evil, with the, oh, it's
a snake.
oh God, it's horrible.
It's a giant snake.
Hey, I thought someone had been photoshopping. When I first saw it, I thought, ha 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 ha. No, it's genuine.
Yeah.
What? Now, my wife is devout Catholic, and I can't get to look at these things, but it is horrible. But then you go to Assisi, and you feel chilled out and well. It's very weird. The Vatican, and as I said, the Vatican Bank, looking like the Bank for International Settlements, just a coincidence. And the Vatican Bank, remember Pope John Paul I, the laughing Pope? Well, I wrote a book. No, I didn't. I read a book by Paul Yarop, about the laughing Pope, who only lasted a few weeks and then was found dead in his bed. No autopsy, of course. The Pope, he's gone. That's the end of it. He was murdered. No ifs, no buts, because he started to ask questions. He was the pontiff. He was the archbishop, or no, he was the cardinal in Venice or something. He started to ask questions about the Vatican Bank. And there's an archbishop, who's come out, absolutely slating the Great Reset and everything. There are good people. We mustn't be tempted to think, oh, the Catholic Church, terrible lot. No, some of them are terrible. A lot of them are bloody good. A lot of the Jews. Well, no, overwhelming the Jews are fine. Overwhelming the Hindus are fine. We've got to get people to climb out of their boxes and say, hello everybody, shake hands, love and everything else, and take on the people who put us in these boxes. And that is what I think is genuinely starting to happen. And so, if I get accused of being anti-Semitic, I love it. Because, I mean, how can I be anti-Semitic? I'm just not. It's just...
Or being far right or...
well, this is the other thing. Oh, the truckers are all far right, and it's the right wing, and the... Oh, please. And of course you've got... And this is the inversion that David Icke talked about last night on the thing. He said it's so strange. He said the Conservatives today are the Liberals and the left of yesterday. And the Liberals and the left today are the ones who are now the... Doesn't that rather... It does. I mean, you know, hate speech. Oh, don't say that. My God, you just said... Oh, I'm offended. I'm offended. Please. Where are you, Plod? Please. I'm offended. Get him. You know, what is this all about? Bloody hell. You know, I don't think I've ever been offended. I don't know what do I feel like when I've been offended? I don't think I've ever been offended. I like to think I've been given a bit of a thick skin. And I always use humour. Oh, that's a good point. Let's round off with this one. Use humour. Because if there's one thing the other side don't like, is being belittled and made fun of. Because they like to think they're important. They like to think. And of course, they like to show off. I mean, my uncle, bless him, was wonderful, but he did show off a little bit. But no, as you get there, they love to feel as though they're the big ones. And if you make fun of them, and you belittle them, and you use really good humour. By the way, I do think the one word that we should be using, and I want to use it on live BBC, because they make an apology straight afterwards for all the people who've been offended, and that is bollocks! I love that word. Only the English could have created the word bollocks. Bugger was quite good, but bollocks is brilliant. Not the F word, that's crude. Bollocks! It's brilliant. Any politician, boom, 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 you're talking bollocks. It's a lovely put down. And people laugh with you, not at you. It's brilliant. So I think the word bollocks should become after freedom. Freedom, yes, not freedom bollocks, but freedom, yes, and anything the other side says, bollocks.
Yay!